Late at night, an icy chill quietly descended, tearing apart the heat lingering outside in an instant. The lights inside were bright, but the atmosphere was chaotic. I lay in bed silently, yet storms raged in my heart. Memories of the past replayed in my mind, betrayals, conspiracies, cold despair, all pointing to the current situation. Low voices came from the guest room next door. I tightened my grip on my phone, my eyes flashing with cold determination. Zhang Jin and Qin Yuanyuan thought their disguise was flawless, but in reality, their tricks were already exposed in my eyes. In my previous life, I naively trusted Zhang Jin's lies, which led to the destruction of my family and ultimately cost me my life. But this time, I won't give them another chance. Time ticked by moment by moment. As the clock struck midnight, the chilling cold crept into every corner like invisible hands. The distant sound of the wind was faint, almost like sobbing, foreshadowing the arrival of a catastrophic frost. I stared hard at my phone. On the already open Pinduoduo app, my fingers swiped as I silently prayed. Sure enough, a familiar voice echoed once again. Congratulations! You've unlocked the Pinduoduo superpower. Every item you order will instantly appear before you. Remember, your ability must stay hidden, or it will invite greed and danger from those with ill intentions. Hearing this, I trembled all over as hatred surged within me like a tidal wave. In my previous life, Zhang Jin took this ability from me, throwing me from the 26th floor to the icy ground, leaving me shattered. But now, everything has changed. I'm back, and I have a second chance. I won't let them win this time. I quickly ordered a complete set of supplies to combat the extreme cold, ultra-thin thermal clothing, portable heating equipment, plenty of fresh food, and even a handheld stove. As the items appeared before me one by one, I felt an overwhelming sense of control. This time, no one will trample me again. A cold smile spread across my lips. In my previous life, I always sought to be kind, retreating even in the face of unrelenting oppression. But this time, I will make them repay every debt they owe me. Killing them would be too easy, I'll make them suffer endlessly. The secret of the storage room remains well guarded. It's the fallback my father left me, and also my strongest trump card. I glanced at the Pinduoduo app again, with a clear plan forming in my mind. When Zhang Jin returned from Qin Yuanyuan's room, pretending everything was normal, his attempt to avoid my gaze didn't escape my notice. Rather than expose him, I simply let out a tired smirk. I just heard some noise. Do you suppose there are rats upstairs? I asked meaningfully. Zhang Jin froze for a moment before regaining composure. No, I just went to check the circuit breakers. You should rest early and stop overthinking. All right, you should rest too. I replied, my smile never reaching my eyes. As I watched him walk into his study, the coldness in my gaze deepened. The creeping chill grew more intense, and I faintly heard screams and cries from outside the window. The neighborhood's power grid was the first to collapse, throwing most people into panic as they were caught off guard by the freezing cold. I turned off the home's heating, lowered the temperature, and pretended nothing was wrong.
What's going on? Why is it suddenly this cold?
My mother-in-law Zhao Meiling burst out of her room, wrapped tightly in a thick blanket, her voice fraught with evident anxiety. Qin Yuanyuan emerged too, clutching her comforter, looking equally panicked.
What's happening? This cold is unbearable. Maybe the system malfunctioned.
I replied in an unhurried tone, standing up and feigning confusion. With the cold wind creeping through the door cracks, Zhao Meiling curled up into a ball, shouting irritably. Nan, figure something out. We live in such a big house, and even the heating can't be maintained? Ugh, what bad luck. I stared at her coldly, the corners of my mouth curling into a sarcastic smile. Don't worry, everyone's facing the same problem. I'll see if I can buy some heating equipment. With that, I turned and walked back to my room, shutting the door behind me. I opened Pinduoduo again and ordered more thermal supplies, quickly filling the storage room with them. At that moment, I felt an unprecedented sense of security. No one could easily crush me like in the previous life. At the same time, I purchased some special items on Pinduoduo, ordinary-looking yet secretly ingenious gadgets. These were part of my counterattack. Let them slowly taste despair. This game has only just begun. Soon, temperatures dropped below freezing. Zhang Jin and Zhao Meiling began anxiously knocking on my bedroom door. Nan Nan, open up. It's freezing out here, we're dying in the cold. I cracked the door open just enough to glare at them. This house was bought with my money, and this room is mine. The heating system isn't working, and everyone's suffering the same, so just sleep and stop bothering me. Without hesitation, I shut the door, letting their knocking grow increasingly desperate and agitated outside. This was only the beginning of their suffering. The way they treated me in my previous life, every ounce of torment, I will return to them exactly the same. By morning, the city was frozen over. I had already secured plenty of heating equipment, so unlike the last lifetime, I didn't wake up shivering from the cold. As dawn approached, the entire city faced a water and power outage. Zhang Jin and Qin Yuan, however, were jolted awake by the freezing cold. Oh, before sleeping last night, I turned off the heating in every room except my own. When I stepped outside, they were in the kitchen, utterly clueless about what to do. As soon as they saw me, they hurriedly asked if I had stocked up on food or supplies. I shook my head and started talking about the dream I had last night.
Last night, I dreamt that Zhang Jin had a superpower. A superpower?
Everyone turned to Zhang Jin after hearing my words. Especially Zhang Jin himself, he suddenly looked incredibly nervous and quickly asked, "What kind of superpower did you dream about?"
Apparently, you can order one item of food every day, and it will appear on the table the next morning.
Everyone rubbed their hands together, clearly skeptical. But Qin Yuan eagerly grabbed Zhang Jin's arm, looking at him with admiration. I knew my cousin was amazing. Even in times like this, he has such a powerful ability. I couldn't stand their nauseating display, but Zhang Jin clearly enjoyed this adulation, his face reddening slightly. He pressed further.
What else did your dream say? Nothing much, just that I might occasionally get dreams to guide us on what to do next. It's just a dream anyway, who knows if it's real?
I intentionally said this to protect myself. In this apocalyptic situation, I understood my position clearly. If these people discovered that I was useless, I'd be the first person they'd abandon. To avoid becoming a target, I had to make myself
valuable.
Sure enough, Zhang Jin's gaze shifted. Meanwhile, Qin Yuan muttered bitterly. Why didn't I get any dreams? That evening, Zhang Jin solemnly knelt on the ground, clasping his hands together as he sincerely prayed. Please, let me have some food and drink. They had gone an entire day without eating, while I had already hidden all the food and fire-starting tools in the storage room. Even if they wanted to burn something to stay warm, it was impossible. When no one was watching, I sneaked into the storage room, my carefully designed secret base. Inside, it was as warm as spring, and food was piled high. I cooked some succulent crabs and paired them with a bowl of fragrant seafood porridge. The comfort was so satisfying I didn't even want to leave the room. After eating to my heart's content, I ordered a generator, electric heaters, and various gear to combat the extreme cold. Before leaving the storage room, I sprayed myself with a newly purchased scent masking spray to cover any food smells and avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, the starving group outside was already in complete disarray. As soon as Zhao Meiling saw me, she grumbled irritably. What kind of daughter-in-law acts like this? The whole family is starving, yet you slept soundly. I smiled faintly and replied. Well, there's no food or drink, so I thought conserving energy might be a good idea. Who knows how long this cold will last? My words hit them where it hurt. There wasn't even a drop of water left in the house, the pipes had long frozen solid into unbreakable ice. Defrosting them? In this sub-zero weather, that was impossible, unless someone was willing to use their body heat to melt it. But these selfish people? That was never going to happen. The more helpless they felt, the more they pinned their hopes on Zhang Jin. They prayed relentlessly, hoping his superpower was real. The next morning, everyone woke up early. Exhausted and starving, they couldn't sleep well at all. They rushed to the kitchen as a group, eager to see if anything had magically appeared on the table. Sure enough, there were bread and bottled water on the table. Shang Changlong, ravenous, pounced on the bread and stuffed a piece into his mouth. But in his haste, he choked. Qin Yuan quickly grabbed the bottled water and handed it to him. Shang Changlong drank too fast, coughed, and spilled half the water on the floor. Within minutes, the spilled water froze into a thin sheet of ice. Zhao Meiling, heartbroken, bent down to gather the frozen water with her hands, but it was futile. Holding back her anger, she complained bitterly.
Save the water! Qin Yuan, why didn't you stop him? The kid doesn't understand, but don't you? Didn't you see there's only one bottle of water?
Normally, I ignored Zhao Meiling's sharp tongue and mean comments. But this time, Qin Yuan wasn't having it. She immediately snapped back.
He's just a kid. What's the big deal? Besides, with my cousin's superpower, do you think we'll run out of food and water?
Flattered by the praise, Zhang Jin quickly put on a magnanimous act. He calmed Zhao Meiling down and then counted the food on the table, 3 pieces of bread and 1 bottle of water. But now, Zhang Changlong had already eaten 1 piece of bread and wasted a good portion of water. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Jin tore 1 piece of bread in half, giving me half and Qin Yuan the other. He kept 1 whole piece for himself. Zhao Meiling's eyes widened in disbelief. Son, what do you mean by this? Without looking up, Zhang Jin explained. Mom, you're still strong and can hold on for a bit. But I need energy to use my superpower, I can't go without food. Yuan has to take care of Changlong, which isn't easy. And Chi-Chi, she can dream and guide us on what to do next, so she needs to eat too. Didn't you always say you've endured lots of hardships in your youth? Going hungry for a couple of days won't kill you. Though furious, Zhao Meiling had to swallow her anger. She took a small sip of water and then sat silently in the corner, shedding quiet tears. I watched this family of hypocrites turn on each other and felt nothing but satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Suddenly, Zhang Jin grabbed my hand and asked urgently.
Did you have another dream last night? What did it say?
His expectant gaze made me want to laugh. I pulled my hand back, feigned seriousness, and said, The dream told me to warn you, don't be greedy. Rationing is the key to survival. Worried he might not believe me, I added. Oh, and it also said there will be hail today. Don't go outside. Just as I finished speaking, a faint tapping sound came from outside the window. Hail was indeed beginning to fall. This sight cemented Zhang Jin's belief in my dream instructions. Qin Yuan, having finished her half of the bread, sidled up to me and said coquettishly, Can I have half of your bread?
Why should I?
I secured the bread behind my back. Aren't you afraid I'll starve to death? Without me, no one will pass on the dream instructions to you. Do you really want to drag us all down with you? Qin Yuan switched tactics, softening her tone. I'm doing this for Changlong. You saw how hungry he was earlier. Have a heart, won't you? She had the audacity to use her child as leverage against me. I turned to Zhang Jin and coldly asked, What do you think? Without hesitation, Zhang Jin said,
You're already so thin, you don't need much food. Changlong is the only heir to our bloodline. Just give him some more.
The only heir? Let's see if you're still this generous tomorrow when there's only a single piece of bread left. I handed over half the bread and turned back to my room. The warmth and abundance in the storage room gave me a renewed sense of security. Watching the surveillance footage, I saw Zhang Jin comforting Qin Yuan, whispering to her sweetly, Don't worry. I'll make sure you and Changlong survive. Meanwhile, Zhao Meiling huddled in a corner, shivering uncontrollably. Her eyes were filled with resentment as she silently swallowed her emotions.
Ha!
This family was nothing but a nest of snakes, each harboring their own schemes. That night, Zhang Jin prayed even harder, kneeling and pleading. God, since you've given me this superpower, why not give me more? Please, give us enough food and water tomorrow. Standing nearby, I struggled to suppress my laughter and shook my head. The next morning, before dawn, everyone was already seated around the table, eagerly waiting for the arrival of their food. But after waiting for hours, the table remained empty. I quietly broke the silence, sharing my dream from last night.
The dream said you were too greedy. Today, there will only be one bottle of water and one piece of bread.
Zhang Jin's face flushed with anger.
That's ridiculous. No one can survive on that.
He glared at me, disbelief written all over his face. Just then, a loud noise from outside diverted everyone's attention. They all turned to look out the window. Taking advantage of the distraction, I quickly pulled a bottle of water and a piece of bread from inside my down jacket and placed them on the table. When they turned back and saw the items, their faces were a mix of shock and fear, disbelief etched into every feature. Zhang Chenglong, though only 10, was utterly famished. He raced forward, grabbed the bread, and devoured it without hesitation. Realizing what was happening, Zhang Jin lunged at him, trying to pry the half-eaten bread from his mouth. Qin Yuan, protective as ever, held Zhang Jin back, allowing Zhang Chenglong to scarf down the rest of the bread and gulp down half the bottle of water. Zhang Jin was furious. Breaking free from Qin Yuan's grip, he kicked Zhang Chenglong in the stomach. Spoiled and pampered his whole life, Zhang Chenglong screamed and cried. "You're a bad dad. I don't want you as my dad anymore." Enraged, Zhang Jin slapped him twice across the face.
You little brat. I'll teach you to eat everything by yourself while the rest of us starve.
Fearing for her son, Qin Yuan quickly turned to me with a forced smile. "Sister-in-law, don't mind what kids say. They just talk nonsense." Her words were polite, but the smug look in her eyes was unmistakable. Clearly, she thought Zhang Chenglong had gotten the better end of the deal. Meanwhile, Zhao Meiling took advantage of the chaos, quietly gulping down the remaining water while pretending nothing had happened. Zhang Jin caught her. His anger erupted again as he slapped her twice.
You old hag. How many years do you even have left? You couldn't wait to drink the last sip of water?
Having tolerated enough, Zhao Meiling fought back this time. After yesterday's events, she had lost all illusions about her son. In a life-or-death situation, blood ties meant nothing. She clawed at Zhang Jin, and the two began wrestling on the floor. Qin Yuan, delighted by the distraction, simply clutched her son tightly and said nothing. When the commotion finally died down, I pulled Zhang Jin aside and whispered in a voice loud enough for the others to hear. The dream said, "Don't be greedy, or tomorrow it'll still be just one bottle of water and one piece of bread." Zhang Jin's face darkened, muttering,
Fine. It's my superpower. I'll use it for myself. These ingrates don't deserve anything.
His selfishness didn't surprise me. If anything, it made things easier for me. I added, "There's one more thing. The dream also said that if someone kills you, they'll inherit your superpower. I don't know if anyone else will have the same dream, but be careful." Fear flashed across Zhang Jin's eyes before turning into gratitude. He looked at me with newfound warmth. "Chi-Chi, don't take what Chenglong said to heart. I only have feelings for you." His words were dripping with fake sincerity, but I found them revolting. Still, I smiled sweetly and replied, "Don't worry. I understand. I'll make sure to give you a share of tomorrow's food." He reassured me. His tone wasn't soft, and it was loud enough for the others to hear every word. Zhao Meiling kept her head down, her face full of resentment. Bruises from Zhang Jin's blows still marked her cheeks, tears brimming in her eyes. But the cold was so harsh she didn't dare let them fall, fearing they might freeze and burn her skin. Qin Yuan, meanwhile, seemed deep in thought, a fleeting smile crossing her face. She never really loved Zhang Jin, but she needed his superpower. Despite the tension, she stayed quiet, tightly holding on to her son. As for Zhang Chenglong, his face was full of frustration. Zhang Jin's kick earlier had completely severed any remaining bond between father and son. I looked around at the room full of people, each hiding their own agenda, and left with a cold smile. Not long after, Zhang Jin pulled me to a corner and whispered nervously.
Can you ask the person in your dream to make the food appear somewhere else tomorrow? I'm afraid someone might tamper with it.
I immediately understood what he meant. Zhang Jin was clearly growing suspicious of Qin Yuan, Zhao Meiling, and even Zhang Chenglong. I nodded thoughtfully and pretended to consider his concerns before agreeing. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, Zhang Jin rushed to knock on my door. He was desperate to confirm where the
food
would appear. I had been sleeping comfortably in the warmth of my storage room, but when the alert sounded, I quickly returned to my bedroom and pretended to have just woken up. Zhang Jin burst into my room and grabbed my hand. Feeling how warm it was compared to the freezing air outside, his brow furrowed. "Why is your hand so warm?" I immediately pulled my hand back and calmly replied.
"I just had a dream. It must have made me a little excited."
Hearing the word
dream,
Zhang Jin immediately dropped his suspicion and nervously asked, "What did it say this time?" I deliberately paused for a moment before replying.
"It said the food will appear in the guest room where you've been staying. You've been sleeping there while keeping watch, haven't you?"
Zhang Jin froze for a second, then slapped his thigh and exclaimed,
"Damn it!"
before dashing out towards the guest room. Of course, he was panicking. He wasn't the only one staying in that room. Qin Yuan had been sneaking in to see him every night. I followed him leisurely, waiting for the drama to unfold. When Zhang Jin stormed into the room, he saw Qin Yuan and Zhang Chenglong wolfing down the bread. They had overheard my earlier conversation with Zhang Jin and had hidden the food before he could get there. By the time Zhang Jin arrived, most of the bread was already gone. Zhang Jin's face turned red with rage. He grabbed Qin Yuan by the hair and slammed her head against the wall. "You damn woman! Stealing food behind my back? Go to hell!" Before his words could even fade, a loud thud came from behind him. Zhang Jin's body stiffened, and he slowly reached up to touch the back of his head. Turning around, he saw Zhang Chenglong holding a heavy table lamp, his face pale with fear and anger. Zhang Jin staggered, falling to his knees and propping himself up with one hand, struggling to stand. But in the next moment, warmth spread across his neck as blood gushed from a fresh wound. He turned his head with great difficulty and saw his mother, Zhao Meiling, standing behind him, holding a kitchen knife. "Mom." Zhang Jin stammered, his voice trembling with disbelief. Zhao Meiling held on to him, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed. "Don't blame me, son. I was starving. I couldn't take it anymore. You're gone now, but Chenglong will live on for you." As those words reached Zhang Jin's ears, his eyes rolled back, and his body collapsed lifelessly to the floor. Zhao Meiling continued crying hysterically, but after a moment, her sobs turned into low, chilling laughter. "The power is mine now, isn't it?" She turned to look at me, and a menacing glint appeared in her eyes as she slowly started walking toward me. Meanwhile, the previous night, Zhang Jin had prayed even more fervently than usual, kneeling and begging. "God, you've given me this superpower, why not give me more? Please, give us enough food and water tomorrow." I watched from nearby, barely able to hold back my laughter, and shook my head at his pathetic display. The next morning, everyone gathered around the table before dawn, holding their breath in anticipation of the
arrival
of food. But the table remained empty. I decided to stir the pot, hesitating for a moment before saying, "The dream told me you were too greedy. Today, there will only be one bottle of water and one piece of bread." Zhang Jin's face turned red with anger. "That's not enough for anyone. Are you making this up?" He glared at me, his voice filled with suspicion. Just then, a loud noise from outside drew everyone's attention to the window. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly pulled the bread and bottle of water hidden in my jacket and placed them on the table. When they turned back, their eyes widened in shock and greed as they saw the bread and water. Zhang Chenglong was the first to act. Starving and desperate, he lunged forward, grabbed the bread, and devoured it in huge bites, his eyes red with hunger. Zhang Jin snapped out of his shock and rushed to Zhang Chenglong, trying to pry the half-eaten bread from his mouth. Qin Yuan, panicking, threw herself at Zhang Jin, shouting, "He's just a child. Let him eat a little more." Zhang Jin, enraged, kicked Zhang Chenglong in the stomach.
You little brat! Eating everything while the rest of us starve?
Zhang Chenglong collapsed to the floor, clutching his stomach and wailing, "You're a bad dad. I'll never forgive you." Meanwhile, Zhao Meiling took advantage of the chaos and quietly snatched the half-empty bottle of water, quickly chugging it. But before she could finish, Zhang Jin caught her. He stormed over, grabbed her by the hair, and slapped her twice.
You old hag! You don't have much time left anyway, and yet you're hoarding water?
Though stunned by the slap, Zhao Meiling wasn't one to back down. Last night's brutal fights had already shattered any remaining illusions she had about her son. She pounced on him, and the two of them began tearing into each other. Qin Yuan stood by with a smirk, clutching Zhang Chenglong and enjoying the scene, happy to see their fight diverting attention from her. After their brawl finally subsided, I pretended to be scared and called Zhang Jin aside, whispering,
The dream warned me, don't be greedy, or there won't be any food for the next few days.
Zhang Jin muttered under his breath,
It's my superpower. Why should I share it with these useless people?
I added,
One more thing, the dream also said that if someone kills you, they'll inherit your power. Be careful, someone might try.
Hearing this, Zhang Jin froze, fear flashing in his eyes. But then, his expression softened as he looked at me with gratitude. Chi-Chi, you're the only one who understands me. Don't worry, I'll make sure to give you a share of tomorrow's food. He said it loud enough for everyone else to hear. Zhao Meiling's lips tightened, her face full of resentment. Qin Yuan's smile betrayed her disdain, while Zhang Chenglong stared at the floor, lost in thought. That night, while Zhang Jin knelt to pray again, I soaked in a steaming bath in the storage room, washing away the day's grime and exhaustion. Through the security cameras, I watched them from the comfort of my secret haven, savoring hot ham rice, boiled meat slices, and braised pork while they scrambled about the house. Zhang Jin left the prayer spot and returned to his room to rest. Qin Yuan and Zhang Chenglong, however, began tearing apart my room, searching for any hidden resources. Zhang Chenglong pounded on walls, desperate to find a secret space. But this storage room was meticulously designed by my father, no amount of searching would lead them to it. After exhausting themselves, they finally gave up in defeat. Zhang Chenglong sulked in the gaming room, staring blankly at the computer, while Qin Yuan collapsed onto the bed in fatigue. I decided it was time to accelerate their breakdown. I ordered a voice changer from Pinduoduo and used it to create a cold, commanding voice. Using the speaker system, I directed it at Zhang Chenglong. Zhang Chenglong. My voice echoed suddenly through the darkness. Who's there? Zhang Chenglong jumped to his feet, his voice trembling with fear as he looked around wildly. Don't be afraid. I've come to tell you, Zhang Chenglong, you've unlocked a superpower. Every day, you'll receive food. My tone shifted lower as I said coldly. It's possible. But you need to do something first. If you kill your mother, I will make sure you get more food. Zhang Chenglong froze, staring blankly. He stayed silent for a long time, looking down at his thin, nearly skeletal hands. The memory of biting into a chicken drumstick flashed in his mind. Licking his lips, he finally asked, How much?
As much as you want. If you don't believe me, check the cabinet in the guest room. I just placed a drumstick there.
At the mention of a drumstick, Zhang Chenglong couldn't contain himself anymore. He rushed to the guest room, opened the cabinet, and greedily devoured the chicken leg inside. The rich smell overwhelmed him, and he forgot everything else in an instant. He gnawed at the bone until it was spotless, then licked his lips with satisfaction and asked, "Is there more? Do what I told you first. Then ask me again." Shang Chenglong hesitated for a moment but eventually stood up, walked to the kitchen, and grabbed a knife. He stormed into Qin Yuanyuan's room. Deep in her sleep, Qin Yuanyuan was completely defenseless. Before she could react, the sharp blade plunged into her chest. Her eyes flew open, her lips moved as if to speak, but she couldn't even finish a sentence before her life slipped away. Looking at his mother lying lifeless in a pool of blood, Shang Chenglong's face remained emotionless. "Mom, you wouldn't survive without food anyway. Don't worry, I'll live on for you and Dad." He then turned to the surveillance camera and said, "God, I did it. Now give me more food. I'm starving." I put down the voice changer and coldly replied in my own voice, "There's no food. Go ahead and wait to die." Shang Chenglong froze. After a brief silence, realization dawned on him. Covered in blood, clutching the knife, he snapped and began screaming, "Where are you? Come out right now. I'm going to kill you." But no matter how hard he searched, he would never find me. Watching them destroy themselves out of greed and selfishness, I finally felt a genuine smile in my heart. The grudges of my past life were finally avenged. Shang Chenglong, though young, wasn't innocent. Whether he survives or not now depends on his own abilities. As for me, I can finally lie down and get a good night's sleep.